Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking on uh, a truly massive story. We're looking back across 4 billion years of life on this planet.
It's a journey that really stretches the imagination.
It really does. I mean, we start in this deep primordial past, and we end with us, with beings who can actually look back and try to piece this whole story together.
And the whole story is just defined by this incredible contrast, isn't it?
Absolutely. You have this almost geological slowness of early life,
Yeah.
and then you set that against the blinding, explosive speed of human development, especially technologically.
It just forces you to completely rethink what fast and slow even mean. For this, we're drawing on some really comprehensive sources that survey this whole history, and we're focusing especially on the work of the astrophysicist Joseph Shklovsky.
Right, his perspective is always so cosmic.
It is. He forces you to view Earth's biology not in isolation, but through this much wider lens. He really challenges us to think in billions of years, not just millions, and to appreciate the profound power of just pure chance.
That's really the mission for our deep dive today, isn't it? To unpack that path
Mm.
evolution took. And it wasn't a straight line. The sources describe it as nonlinear, extravagant, even fantastically wasteful.
Completely.
So we're not just here to list a timeline of events. We're asking a much bigger sort of philosophical question. Was the rise of human intelligence just inevitable? Was it written into the laws of the universe from the start,
Or was it a fluke?
or was it a total fluke, a series of cosmic and biological accidents that just happened to break our way? Did we basically win the cosmic lottery?
And, the sources really push you in that direction toward the lottery conclusion. When Shklovsky looks at these timescales, he shows that life wasn't just a passenger adapting to the planet.
No, it became an actor.
It became a cosmic factor, as he puts it. Life itself started re-engineering the planet. It radically reshaped the atmosphere, the oceans, the climate.
And to really get that, you have to start at the beginning and confront just how stagnant things were for so long.
Okay, so let's unpack this timeline. Because the slowness at the start, it's really, really counterintuitive.
So let's talk about the dawn of life. We have this image of it being this incredibly difficult, slow process. But the start was actually pretty quick, right?
Surprisingly quick, yeah. The conditions on the planet stabilized, and the sources suggest life got going when Earth was only a few 100 million years old, maybe 4 billion years ago.
For something as complex as abiogenesis, life from non-life, that feels almost instantaneous in geological terms.
It does, but then once life was established, it just hit a wall. It stalled.
And these earliest life forms, what were they like?
Incredibly simple. We're talking single-celled organisms. And the key thing is they didn't have a nucleus. They were prokaryotes. Think bacteria, and especially the blue-green algae, the cyanobacteria.
Okay, so simple, successful, but stuck.
Exactly. They were stuck in this evolutionary rut for a length of time that is just astronomical.
And this is the part that I think really shocks people when they first hear it. This is the timeline shocker.
It really is. The sources are clear. It took half of Earth's entire evolutionary history. So a span of about 2 billion years, just for the first cells with a nucleus, the eukaryotes, to finally show up.
2 billion years.
Think about that. We put a man on the moon less than a century after we figure out flight.
Yeah.
Life spent 2 billion years just figuring out a better internal structure for a single cell.
So what was happening in all that time? Was it just treading water?
Well, it was perfecting the fundamentals, metabolism, DNA replication, and repair. But in terms of major leaps in complexity, it was basically static. It just shows how incredibly difficult and non-obvious that next step, the eukaryotic cell, really was.
The blueprint for everything complex.
Right.
For us.
For us, for trees, for mushrooms, for everything you can see without a microscope, that breakthrough was the foundation.
And once that happened, once the eukaryote was on the scene, that's when we get the next big jump, which is multicellularity.
Exactly. That also happened around the same time, maybe 1 to 2 billion years ago. And it probably wasn't a totally new invention from scratch. It was more like those single-celled eukaryotes started,
Right.
hanging out together in colonies.
And then they started specializing.
They started dividing the labor. Instead of every cell for itself, you'd get some cells that focused on absorbing nutrients, others on moving the colony around, others on reproduction. And that differentiation is the whole secret to complex life.
So you have these simple but incredibly successful life forms, and they're just everywhere. And their existence, just by being there and doing their thing, starts to change the entire planet.
This is the Proterozoic era, and it's where life goes from being a resident to being the chief architect of the planet. It's the creation of the biosphere.
And the main tool for that planetary engineering project was?
Photosynthesis, mostly from those blue-green algae. This process starts kicking in maybe 3.5 billion years ago, and it triggers two massive changes that dictate the entire future of the planet.
Okay, what are they?
First, it starts pulling huge amounts of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and locking it away. And second, it starts releasing a waste product, a very, very dangerous waste product.
Oxygen.
Free oxygen. And this is where the story goes from slow progress to sudden planetary violence. It's an event we now call the oxygen catastrophe.
It's such a great name because we think of oxygen as life, but back then,
It was death. It was arguably the single greatest mass extinction in the history of the planet, far worse than what happened to the dinosaurs.
why was it so deadly?
Well, up to that point, everything had evolved in an anaerobic and oxygen-free environment. Free oxygen is incredibly reactive chemically. It just rips electrons off of organic molecules and destroys them. For the vast majority of life on Earth at the time, the changing atmosphere was a deadly, corrosive poison.
So life was basically polluting its own cradle to death.
That's a perfect way to put it. It was an existential crisis. The only way to survive was to either hide from the oxygen or figure out a way to use it.
And that's where natural selection gets really dramatic.
Incredibly dramatic. The sources make it clear that only a tiny fraction of life forms managed to adapt. They developed defenses, and then they made the big leap. They transitioned to aerobic life. They learned to breathe this poison.
And that turned out to be a massive advantage.
A world-changing advantage. See, using oxygen for respiration is vastly more efficient. It gives you so much more energy than anaerobic processes. And with all that extra energy, suddenly you have the fuel for bigger bodies, for faster movement, for more complexity. The oxygen catastrophe was this brutal evolutionary bottleneck, but the few things that squeezed through came out with superpowers.
So oxygen, the great pollutant, the mass killer, ends up being the key that unlocks the door to all future complexity.
Exactly. But even with that key, it took a very, very long time to actually walk through the door and leave the ocean.
Right, because for eons, life was still just confined to the water, the hydrosphere. Getting onto land was this whole other monumental challenge.
And it happened so late in the game. We're talking about the Cambrian period, maybe 500 million years ago.
Which, again, just to hammer home the timescale. By the time the first creatures were crawling onto a beach, 90% of Earth's history had already gone by.
90%. We always focus on the last 10% because that's where all the cool fossils are, you know, the dinosaurs and the big mammals.
That's where the action is.
That's where the action is. But you have to respect the 3.5 billion years it took just to build the microbial foundation and terraform the planet.
Okay, so the foundation is laid, life has a nucleus, it can use oxygen, it's figured out multicellularity, and then the pace picks up.
It doesn't just pick up, it explodes. We enter the Paleozoic era, and it kicks off with this incredible burst of diversity.
The famous Cambrian explosion, around 540 million years ago. All of a sudden, the oceans are just teeming with all these highly organized, complex animals. Almost all the major body plans we see today get their start right there.
And we can look at a group like the trilobites as a great example. These were the ancestors of, modern insects and crabs.
And they were just simple little grubs.
Not at all. The fossil record shows over 1,000 species of them. They were incredibly sophisticated. They had already developed complex, compound eyes. Some of them grew up to a meter long. This wasn't primitive life anymore. This was complex anatomy evolving at a gallop.
We also start seeing hard parts. Shells appear for the first time.
Which is huge for defense, for muscle attachment, for everything. You also get the echinoderms, the ancestors of starfish and mollusks and brachiopods. The seas were just a wild laboratory of new forms.
But the next great frontier was still out there, leaving the water for good.
That was the next big hurdle. And it really happened in stages across the Silurian and Devonian periods. The clans had to go first.
They had to lay the groundwork.
Literally, they had to create an ecosystem on land. So in the Silurian, you get the pioneers, the ferns, the mosses, the horsetails. They start colonizing the land. They create soil, they hold moisture.
They roll out the green carpet.
Exactly. And once that carpet is there, providing food and shelter, then the animals can follow. So in the Devonian, the age of fishes, you get the first animals, probably lobe-finned fish, starting to venture out, maybe to escape predators, maybe to find new food. They'd crawl onto land for a bit and then go back to the water.
And this all sets up the Carboniferous period, which seems to be where terrestrial life really takes off.
Oh, absolutely. The plant kingdom just went wild. You get these massive swampy forests all over the globe, which of course later become the coal deposits we use today.
And the sources suggest this might have been helped along by increased volcanic activity. More CO2 in the air.
Yeah, more CO2 would have been like a super fertilizer for all that plant life. And with all those plants, you get the rise of the first truly dominant land animals, the amphibians.
They had really mastered moving and eating on land, but they still had one big weakness.
They were still tied to the water for reproduction. They had to lay their soft, jelly-like eggs in ponds or swamps to keep them from drying out.
That's a major limitation. And that's exactly why the next evolutionary invention, which came with the first reptiles, was so unbelievably important.
It was the game changer for life on land. The source calls it the Great Reptilian Invention.
Which was the amniotic egg, the hard-shelled egg.
Yes, a simple concept, but it changed everything. It was basically a private, portable pond for the embryo. It had a food supply, a protective shell. With that one innovation, reptiles were completely freed from the water. They could live and reproduce anywhere on land.
There's a quote in our source material from a reptile expert that I just love. It's so evocative.
I know the one you mean.
It says, already in the first egg laid by the first reptile on land were contained both the singing of birds and human thought.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It just perfectly captures how that one simple structural change unlocked this entire chain of future possibilities. Our entire vertebrate lineage, including birds and us, traces directly back to the success of that reptilian egg.
So with that invention, reptiles take over. The Mesozoic era becomes the kingdom of reptiles, the age of dinosaurs.
Total domination. And the sources point out something really important here. The first mammals actually appeared very early in the Mesozoic.
But they were just background players.
Completely marginal. They were these small, probably nocturnal, shrew-like creatures just trying to stay out of the way of the dinosaurs. And they stayed that way for over 100 million years.
Living in the shadow.
For a very, very long time. And then suddenly, everything changes. The biosphere gets completely restructured, and we enter the Cenozoic, our current era. And that upheaval is what finally ushers in the kingdom of mammals. And as we're about to see, that transition was anything but a gentle changing of the guard.
When you look at the whole 4 billion year arc of life, one of the things that just jumps out is the sheer excess of it all, the biological extravagance.
It's astounding. Paleontologists estimate that something like 500 million species have existed on Earth over its history. 500 million.
That number. It's just a testament to a process that looks less like careful engineering and more like throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah. The sources have some great phrasing for it. They call it fantastically wasteful and redundant form creation. Evolution isn't efficient in the way an engineer is. It's wildly, creatively extravagant. It pours incredible energy into making variants that go nowhere.
And the vast majority of them do go nowhere. Today, we've only got about 2 million identified species left from that original 500 million.
It's a tiny fraction. And even when you look at what survived, the distribution is just as lopsided and, wasteful.
The numbers in the material are pretty humbling.
They really are. Something like 75% of all animal species today are insects. 3 out of every 4 animals is an insect.
And mammals, our group.
We're a rounding error, about 3,500 species. And out of those, about 2,500 are rodents. So biologically speaking, we are a tiny, insignificant twig on the tree of life.
And in terms of sheer biomass, the total weight of living stuff?
It's not even close. It's overwhelmingly green plants. We are a statistical anomaly living in a world that is fundamentally botanical and dominated by insects.
And this whole idea of wastefulness leads us right to the concept of contingency, that our existence wasn't planned.
Exactly. Yes, there's this continuous line from algae to us, but the specific path that line took depended on a huge number of completely random events. Nature tried out endless variations, and our particular path was just one of countless routes through this massive biological maze, and almost all of those routes were dead ends.
And there is no greater example of this, of contingency, than the one event that makes our own existence a complete statistical longshot.
The dinosaur contingency.
The entire story of modern life on this planet hangs on a thread from 65 million years ago.
It really does. It hangs on the fact that a random cosmic event intervened and wiped the slate clean.
If that massive extinction at the end of the Cretaceous hadn't happened,
mammals would have never had their chance. It's that simple. They would have remained those small, scurrying creatures in the undergrowth.
because all the big ecological jobs, apex predator, large herbivore, they were all taken.
They were filled, and had been for 100 million years, by incredibly successful, highly adapted reptiles. The dinosaurs' long reign would have almost certainly meant that mammalian evolution would have just fizzled out. It would have been a dead end. Our rise wasn't earned, it wasn't inevitable. It happened because a planetary catastrophe cleared the stage for us.
This level of randomness, it forces us to look beyond just simple, predictable natural selection.
Right. Natural selection plus mutation is obviously the main engine, but our sources point out that there are other factors, other weird things going on that are the subject of, as they put it, lively and even fierce debate among biologists.
Let's get into some of those anomalies because they really mess with the simple story of survival of the fittest.
Okay, take the rat experiment. This is a famous study. You put a population of rats in a perfect environment, a rat utopia. Unlimited food, water, space, no predators.
You'd expect them to just multiply like crazy.
And they did at first. But then something strange happened. The population growth just stopped. And the rats started to degenerate. Their social behaviors completely broke down.
They stopped grooming, stopped building nests, stopped caring for their young.
Some just became completely withdrawn. And the conclusion that some researchers drew, the one highlighted in the sources, is that they just got bored with life.
Bored with life.
The struggle was gone, the pressure was off, and without that pressure, the very drive to live and reproduce seemed to just atrophy. That is very, very difficult to explain with simple Darwinian mechanics.
How does a behavior that's so bad for the species pop up when you remove the environmental stress? It's deeply weird.
It is. And then you have the other classic puzzle, the lemmings.
The mass suicide myth. Which isn't entirely a myth, right?
Not entirely. These huge cyclical population booms happen, and they often end with mass deaths, with lemmings migrating in huge numbers and many drowning.
So the sources ask the obvious question. How does an instinct for mass self-destruction fit into a model where individuals are supposed to be trying to pass on their genes?
It doesn't, not easily. If it's genetic, it should have been eliminated immediately. If it's just a response to overcrowding, it seems like an incredibly extreme solution. It haps at these very complex group-level dynamics that we just don't fully understand.
And then there's a final curveball from embryology.
Right. The fact that you sometimes see features in embryos that correspond to evolutionarily later stages of development, it complicates the idea that evolution is just a simple linear adding of new parts.
It's more like a remix.
That's a great way to put it. It suggests evolution is sometimes just tinkering with the timing of existing developmental programs, speeding one up, slowing one down, and that can lead to really big, sudden jumps in form that aren't about the slow accumulation of tiny changes.
So you take all of this, the wastefulness, the pure chance of the dinosaur extinction, these weird behavioral anomalies, and it all points to one huge conclusion, especially when we think about life out there in the universe.
The non-repeatability of evolution.
This is a huge takeaway for anyone interested in astrobiology.
It's fundamental. The sheer number of steps, the chain of accidents, the cosmic interventions. It means that the exact path life took on Earth can practically never happen again anywhere else.
So talking about another Earth with humans on it is basically science fiction.
It's statistically meaningless.
Yeah.
Shklovsky runs the numbers. Even if you're super optimistic and say there are 100 million planets with life in our galaxy, the probability of the exact same sequence of events happening, the right kind of star, the oxygen catastrophe, the invention of the egg, the perfectly timed asteroid to produce something like us is just unimaginably smaller than that.
So what can we say is likely to happen on other life-bearing planets?
The only thing we can say with some confidence is that life, once it gets started, will probably evolve toward more complexity and better adaptation to its local environment.
But the specifics, the path to two-legged, tool-using philosophers.
That was a one-time roll of the cosmic dice, and we just happened to be here to see it.
So this brings us to the final, and in some ways most dramatic, stage of the story, the path to intelligent life.
A completely new stage in the development of matter itself, right? You go from non-living matter to life, and then to intelligent life that can contemplate the matter it came from.
The sources try to pin down our origins. Paleontology is always pushing the dates back, but a key find was Ramapithecus.
Found in India, yeah. Maybe 15 million years ago, one of the earliest signs of a split from the main primate line.
But if we look at the genetics, the molecular clock,
The estimates for our genus, Homo, put the origin at around 2.7 million years ago. But that still leaves the big question. What actually kicked it off? What was the trigger that pushed our ancestors down this very strange evolutionary path?
We know that later on, things like tool use and collective labor were huge drivers. They shaped our hands, our brains, our societies.
Absolutely. But they couldn't have been the initial spark. Something had to happen first to get us out of the trees and standing on 2 feet.
And this is where Shklovsky, in the source material, puts forward a very original hypothesis.
It's a fantastic thought experiment. It really drives home the role of chance.
It certainly does. The hypothesis suggests the trigger for bipedalism wasn't about seeing over tall grass or carrying food. It was parasites.
Itchy parasites.
Itchy apes. The idea is that a particular species of ape was so plagued by parasites that they were forced to spend a lot of time standing up on their hind legs so they could use their front limbs to scratch themselves.
And that constant action over a long period first freed the forelimbs from walking and then started to develop their dexterity, setting the stage for tool use down the line.
Okay, I have to pause here. Is there any actual fossil evidence for this, or is this really just a way to illustrate a point?
It's definitely more of a thought experiment. The point isn't that it was definitely parasites. The point is that the trigger was likely something completely random and unpredictable like that. It was, as the source says, His Majesty chance that played the decisive role.
And that idea really pushes back against the notion that intelligence was some kind of destiny.
It shatters it. If it was inevitable, if it was the ultimate goal of evolution, it wouldn't have taken 4 billion years and relied on a series of bizarre accidents.
It means we have to accept what the poet Pushkin called indifferent nature.
Nature does not care about us. It is not mandatory for life to become intelligent. On this planet, it happened once for reasons that were probably totally random. We just cannot assume it's a universal endpoint for life everywhere.
Which brings us back to the idea of wastefulness, but this time applied to our own brains. The idea in intelligence as evolutionary overkill.
We have so much more brain power than we strictly need for survival. The redundancy in the human brain is just immense.
If you're just talking about outcompeting other animals in the Stone Age, hunting, gathering, avoiding predators.
The brain of a Neanderthal or even a Cro-Magnon, who actually had slightly larger brains than we do, was more than enough for the job. Way more than enough.
So why the extra horsepower? Why did evolution push our brains so far beyond the immediate practical needs of survival?
This is where the source makes a really powerful and humbling comparison. Our hyper-developed brain might just be another example of nature's extravagance.
Like what?
Like the ridiculously oversized, heavy defensive armor on some of the giant Mesozoic reptiles, or the enormous, unwieldy canine teeth of the saber-toothed tiger.
Things that were impressive, but maybe became a hindrance. That armor must have cost a huge amount of energy to grow and carry around, and those saber teeth were so specialized, they might have been easily broken.
Exactly. They were evolutionary experiments in excess. And the argument is that our massive brain, with its ability to do calculus and write poetry, might be the same kind of thing. An evolutionary luxury, a fantastic overdevelopment that happened by chance, not by necessity. And our civilization is just a lucky side effect of that overkill.
So if our entire existence as a species depends on that one random event 65 million years ago, it raises a terrifying question. Are those kinds of events really random?
Or is there a pattern, a hidden cosmic rhythm? And that's where the statistical analysis of the fossil record that's really mind-bending.
Oh, that's a show.
When you look at the extinction rates of marine animals over the last 250 million years, you find that the big extinction events haven't been random at all. They've been periodic.
Periodic, like clockwork.
Almost. They seem to occur with a remarkably consistent interval of about 26 million years.
So the dinosaur extinction wasn't a one-off freak event. It was just the latest and maybe biggest pulse in a recurring cycle of planetary death.
That's what the data suggests. And according to that clock, the last major pulse was about 13.5 million years ago.
Which means we're about halfway through the current cycle. We're in the quiet period.
For now.
Okay, let's go back to the dinosaur killer itself. The evidence for an impact is the iridium layer, right?
Right. It's called the KPG boundary. It's this thin global layer of clay, only about a centimeter thick, but it's loaded with the element iridium, 1,000 times the normal amount.
And iridium is rare on Earth's surface, but common in asteroids.
Exactly. It's the smoking gun for a massive impact from an object several kilometers across. The energy from that collision would be... It's almost impossible to comprehend. 10 to the power of 7 megatons.
The effects would have been apocalyptic.
Total global catastrophe. Dust blocking out the sun for years, temperatures plummeting by tens of degrees, hurricane force winds everywhere. The sources note that these effects look a lot like the models for a full-scale nuclear war.
But here's the problem. Asteroid impacts are random. A random cause can't explain a periodic 26 million year effect.
Precisely. The periodicity demands a non-random cause, something rhythmic, something cosmic.
And this is where the science gets really wild. This is the Nemesis hypothesis.
Proposed by Muller, Davis, and Hutt. Their idea is that our sun isn't alone, that we're actually in a binary star system.
We have a companion star.
A hidden companion. They named it Nemesis after the Greek goddess of retribution. The theory is that it's a very small, cold, dim star, maybe a red or brown dwarf, so it's basically invisible to us.
And its orbit is the key.
Its orbit is everything. They calculated it would have to be on this huge, eccentric, elliptical path that takes exactly 26 million years to complete.
The scale of this orbit is it's immense. What are the distances we're talking about?
At its farthest point, it's about 150,000 astronomical units away. That's over 2 light years. But at its closest approach, it comes into about 30,000 AU.
And that brings it close enough to disturb the Oort cloud.
Exactly. The Oort cloud is this enormous spherical shell of trillions of dormant comets surrounding the solar system. It's the deep freeze.
So every 26 million years, Nemesis swings by.
Its gravity plows through the edge of the Oort cloud, and it knocks loose a whole storm of comets. It puts the whole cloud into a wild frenzy, as the source says.
And thousands of these comets then come hurtling into the inner solar system.
And it only takes one of them, a big one, to hit the Earth and trigger a mass extinction. It's a beautiful, terrifyingly elegant explanation for the periodic die-offs.
But is there any other evidence for it?
It's mixed. If you look at the dates of large impact craters on Earth, the astroblems, there is a bit of a periodicity around 28 million years, which is close, but it's not a perfect match. And we haven't found other big iridium layers that line up perfectly with the other extinctions.
So there are other ideas.
There's a major alternative. Rampino and Sloter suggested it's not a companion star, but our solar system's movement through the galaxy itself.
How does that work?
Well, our solar system doesn't just orbit the galactic center in a flat plane. It also bobs up and down, kind of like a horse on a carousel. And the period of that bobbing motion is about 30 million years.
Which is very close to the 26 million year cycle.
Very close. The idea is that every time we pass through the central plane of the galaxy, we might pass through very dense clouds of interstellar dust. And that dust could partially block the sun's energy, triggering a global cooling event and an extinction.
Two incredible cosmic theories. How do we ever find out which one, if either, is right?
For Nemesis, the proof would be finding it. So astronomers are looking. They're searching for a very faint cold star that has a large proper motion, something that appears to be moving across our sky relatively quickly because it's so much closer than the background stars.
Finding it would be monumental.
The source says it would be a discovery on the same level as the Copernican system. It would completely change our understanding of our place in the cosmos and the forces that have directly shaped the story of life on our own planet. Our very evolution might be tied to the ticking of a dark, invisible clock.
We've laid out this 4 billion year story of slow, contingent, wasteful development. And then at the very end, this thinking being appears and just changes all the rules.
It's a complete break from the past. By developing this massive redundant brain we talked about, humanity made this sudden leap out of equilibrium with the biosphere.
We stopped just adapting to the environment and started adapting the environment to us on a global scale.
And the pace of that change is the key. The whole process went into hyperdrive with the technological era, just 350 years ago. In geological time, that's not even the blink of an eye. And in that moment, human development just exploded.
And the result, as the sources argue, is that we've now become the primary threat. Our own uncontrolled activity poses a real existential risk to the very biosphere that created us.
We've become the new catastrophe, like the oxygen crisis, but happening thousands of times faster.
And you can see it everywhere.
Yeah.
The sources point to the near-total disappearance of large predators, which throws entire ecosystems out of whack. The way industrial agriculture just erases natural ecological niches.
And of course, the most obvious one, the fact that we invented the means of our own nuclear self-destruction, the ability to create an impact-level event ourselves. We're fundamentally altering the atmosphere and the oceans at a rate the planet has never seen.
Which forces you into this very philosophical place. The sources express a kind of hope, but it feels very fragile.
It's a hope based on faith, really. Faith that this intelligence we have isn't just a technical skill for building things, but that it can include the wisdom to reorganize ourselves and find a new, sustainable equilibrium with our world.
It's interesting to think that this high-tech, globe-spanning path we're on wasn't the only option. It wasn't inevitable.
Not at all. The source brings up the Mayans as an example, a society that achieved incredible cultural complexity in astronomy and architecture and mathematics for thousands of years without ever heading down the path of industrial technology.
It suggests that the path a civilization takes depends as much on its values, its philosophy, as it does on its raw intelligence.
Exactly. Intelligence just gives you options. Wisdom is about which options you choose. If our intelligence was a statistical fluke, an evolutionary luxury, then our survival now depends entirely on whether we can use that luxury to overcome our own worst impulses. It's not an evolutionary test anymore, it's a moral and philosophical one.
So, we have come to the end of this incredible deep dive. We've gone from the first blue-green algae through that excruciatingly slow crawl the first few billion years, right up to us.
We've covered the complexity of selection, the strange anomalies like the lemmings, the sheer, staggering role of chance in the death of the dinosaurs and the rise of mammals, and the fantastic wastefulness of nature that, by chance, gave us our own oversized brains.
And I think the biggest, most important takeaway for anyone listening, for you, is just how contingent our existence is. It's the product of a unique, non-replicable series of cosmic accidents.
We won the lottery, we survived the oxygen apocalypse, and we benefited from a comet that we had nothing to do with. We are profoundly lucky to be here.
So what does that mean for us right now? The sources really seem to be saying that while getting to intelligence was a game of chance, staying intelligent, staying alive is now a game of choice.
Right. It all hinges on whether this redundant overkill intelligence we have can actually solve the crises we've created for ourselves. We might have the biggest brain in planetary history, but the jury is still out on whether we have the wisdom to go with it.
And that brings us back one last time to the stars. The research we've looked at leaves you with this powerful and frankly unsettling final thought.
That the great rhythms of life and death on this planet might not be driven by anything on Earth at all. They might be dictated by the most distant, unseen cosmic forces. If that 26 million year clock of extinction is real, whether it's Nemesis or our passage through the galaxy, we have to ask a very humbling question. Are we ready for the next cycle?
This long, strange history of life shows us that when that cosmic clock strikes, we are all subject to chance once again. And that is something truly profound for you to mull over.